This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. I'm undertaking a series of videos on how to bind off ribbing. This first bind off is the Smiles and Frowns bind off. It's my very favorite needle bind off, and I think that everyone can learn this, and it's an extremely useful stitch. My next bind off is a double backstitch bind off. It's a little firmer bind off than many, kind of a very interesting decorative edge. It looks like pearls along the edge. My next bind off I call the Pearl Graft bind off. It goes on kind of like Kitchener stitch. Very stretchy, very professional looking, with a little bit of a pearl stitch again along the edge. This next bind off was done with a crochet hook, and it's a way to bind off after you're off the machine and get the same look as a loop through a loop bind off. And this last bind off is a whip stitch bind off, and it simply involves getting 2 whip stitches into every single knit stitch on either side of the 1x1 ribbing. So those are the different ways that you can bind off after the fact with ribbing, and I'm going to have a few little videos showing how to do these. What I have here is a sample of ribbing, and I'm doing a Smiles and Frowns bind off. Now, I've made a video of this before, but it was a long time ago. It was part of my ribber course, and I just really want to make sure that as I do these new bind offs that people go and look at this old one. So this is probably my favorite bind off. Now, I started by bringing my yarn inside this circular knitting. I end my ribbing that has to be needle bound off with circular because it makes it so easy to do this. Often when you look in books, they will have an illustration of people doing this on live stitches, but that's just too risky. If you pull a little too hard, the live stitches unravel. This holds everything securely for you. So what you do for Smiles and Frowns is the yarn is coming out here, and the very edge-most stitch is this one. And what you do is you think of this as the middle of the work, and then think of this part and this part by the waist yarn as the outside. So you go in and then come out. Now, you see how my needle is following the curve of the waist yarn. That gray waist yarn goes that same direction. And then you pull the yarn up, but not too tight. This is all very gentle. Then go to the other side. You're going to go in this first one, and you're going to follow the waist yarn. That's the smile from my point of view, the frown from your point of view. It's a U shape. In here and out here. Now, back over to the first side. You want to do the next one of these U-shaped things, and from your point of view it's a smile. You want to do that by going into the same one that you went into before. So you can see this loop already has been stitched into, so I'm stitching into every loop twice. Not unusual at all when you're working with live knitted stitches. So there I go, in and out following that waist yarn, making a smile. Now to the other side to make a frown. So I go in that same loop again on that side and come out in the frown shape. And draw it up just enough. Now the drawn up stitches just look like little back and forth, like little I don't know, laces on a shoe that aren't crossed. And that's how they should look. Now I'm going to follow this bit of waist yarn, go in the same loop as last time on my side, and go through there. So that's the smile stitch on my side. And draw that up gently. And then over on your side of the road, I'm going to go in this one, follow the waist yarn, and make that frown stitch. Then back on my side, in and out, using a used stitch, then a new stitch, and making the smile over to your side of the street, in, get my needle in there, out, making that frown. Just nice to have the smiles and frowns ideas so that you can keep the U's right side up and upside down where they ought to be. But the fact is, you're always entering that stitch from the outside of the work and going toward the inside, and then you're coming out inside to out, and that made your frown stitch. Outside to in, inside to out, to make that next smile. And I'll stitch all the way across here and then show you what we have. Well, when you get over to the tail end, you're just going to go across the street like always. And go back in that last one. And then I need to push my yarn down to the inside to make it easier to get the waste yarn off. I'll unravel this waste yarn. There are several things I like about this completed cast off. First of all, it's stretchy, it's easy, and it has a very professional look. Also, it kind of mimics the way that the beginning of the knitting looks. So it goes together really well if you have a project where the beginning and the end are both going to show. So that's the Smiles and Frowns method of casting off ribbing.